Hello students and welcome back to Jules Math Tools. In our session today, this is part 2 of calculating angles on a straight line when we're using decimal numbers. And if you want to see how to calculate your angles on a straight line when multiple decimal numbers are involved, make sure that you stay tuned. So in our examples today, this is part 2 of calculating the measure of our unknown angles when we're using decimal numbers. And in our examples today, we have multiple decimal numbers involved. So we're going to begin, as we always do, by first writing out our equation. So remember that your angle C plus 102.2 degrees plus 25.3 degrees is equal to 180 degrees. And we're going to first begin by summing the numbers that were given to us. That means we're adding our 102.2 degrees plus our 25.3 degrees. And if you remember what I said in our previous video when we calculated the measure of our unknown angle when we had a decimal number, I reminded you that when you're calculating decimal numbers, especially with addition and subtraction, we never line up the numbers. Remember that we always first line up the decimal points and then we write in our other numbers. So until you are to that point where you're comfortable with just putting in the decimal point and writing out the numbers the correct way, start by first writing the decimal point and then filling in your other numbers. Okay, so once we have our decimal points aligned, we're going to now begin our operation. So 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. 2 plus 5 is equal to 7. 0 plus 2 is equal to 2. And 1 plus nothing will be 1. And again, just like subtraction, we're going to drop our decimal point right down the center. So the sum of our two angles is equal to 127 and 5/10, and again these should sum to 180 degrees. So now that I have the sum of my two angles that were given, I'm now going to subtract that sum from 180 degrees. And again, remember that your decimal point in your whole number is always behind that last digit. So just because you don't see a decimal point in 180 degrees doesn't mean it doesn't have one. You just have to write it in. So my decimal point goes behind my 0, and now I'm going to write in my decimal point again and fill in my other numbers with my 7 underneath the 0, my 2 underneath the 8, and my 1 underneath the 1, and my 5 will go behind the decimal point. And we can write in the 0 above that 5 to help us with our calculation. And remember that that 0 does not change the value of my 180 degrees. And now that our question is set up, let's begin calculating. 0 can subtract 5, so we're going to borrow from our 8. Our 8 will become 7, making my first 0 10. I'm going to borrow from that 10, making it 9, and changing my last 0 into 10. So 10 subtract 5 will equal to 5. 9 subtract 7 will equal to 2. 7 subtract 2 is equal to 5, and 1 subtract 1 is equal to 0. And just like with our addition, we're going to drop our decimal point right down from where it is. So my angle C will equal to 52.5 degrees. And remember that with your angles on a straight line, if you calculated your question and you're not sure if the answer is correct, remember that we can always go back, perform our substitution. Remember we said that C is equal to 52 and 5/10. So that means we can add up all of our numbers and see if these digits all add up to 180 degrees. I'll write in my 2, 0, 1, put my 2 behind the decimal point, write in my next decimal point, and again we're going to line up our numbers in their respective positions. So 5 plus 2 is equal to 7. 7 plus 3 is 10. Put my 0, carry the 1. 5 plus 2 is 7, 7 plus 2 is 9, and 9 plus 1 will give us 10. Put our 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 5 is 6, 6 plus 0 is 6, 6 plus 2 is 8, and we'll bring our 1 down. And remember that we drop that decimal point right down from where it is. So we can see that when we substitute C back into the equation, that when we add up all of these numbers, they do sum to 180 degrees, which tells us that the measure for our angle C is correct. Let's try another example. Feel free at this point to pause the video and calculate the measure of B, and then when you're ready, you can unpause the video and see if I got the exact same answer that you did. Okay, so let's begin. So our angle B plus 45 and 7/10 plus 92 and 81/100 should equal to 180 degrees. We're going to sum our first two numbers that we're given. So 45.7, and we're going to add in our decimal point. Put my 2 underneath the 5, my 9 underneath the 4, my 8 goes underneath my 7, and my 1 will be written after my 8. And again, just like we did before, we are going to add in a 0. So just fill in that space to help us with our addition. So 0 plus 1 is equal to 1. 8 plus 7 is equal to 15. Put our 5, carry the 1. 1 plus 5 is 6. And 6 plus 2 is 8. 9 plus 4 is equal to 13. And we're going to drop our decimal point right down from where it is. So my angle B plus 138 and 50/100 degrees, or 138.51 degrees, is equal to 180 degrees. Now we're going to be subtracting from our 180 degrees. Remember that we put in our 180 degrees. My decimal point goes behind the last digit, which is my 0. And now I'm going to write in my 138.51 degrees. Put in my decimal point. My 8 will go underneath the 0, my 3 underneath the 8, and my 1 underneath the 1. And we will write in our 51 behind the decimal point. And again, remember that we are subtracting, so we can add those 0 in, which will help us with our calculations, and especially with following the pattern of our regrouping with all of these zeros that we are working with. So now that our question is set up, let's begin calculating. So 1 can't be subtracted from 0, so that means that we're going to have to go all the way to our 8 and borrow from that 8, making it 7. My first 0 will become 10. I will borrow from that 10, making it 9. Now my second 0 will become 10. I'm going to borrow from that 10 again, making it 9, and then take my 1 to the last 0. So my 10 subtract 1 will equal to 9. 9 subtract 5 will equal to 4. 9 subtract 8 is equal to 1. 7 subtract 3 is equal to 4, and 1 subtract 1 is equal to 0. And because we are subtracting, we will drop our decimal point right down the center from where it is. So my angle B is equal to 41 and 49/100 degrees, or 41.49 degrees. And remember, after your calculation, if you still want that extra to make you feel as if you did your work correctly, go back and perform your substitution by replacing your B with the 41.49 degrees that you got, and sum all of your numbers up to see if they do add up to 180 degrees. Remembering that we are lining up decimal points and not our numbers. So remember that you're lining up your decimal points, not your numbers. And in anywhere in your working where there's a blank spot, you can always fill that in with a 0. Remember, the 0 will not change the value of the number, but just help you better with flowing with your working. So 9 plus 0 is 9. 9 plus 1 will give us 10. Put our 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 plus 7 is 12. 12 plus 8 is 20. We're going to put our 0, carry the 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 plus 2 is 10. Put our 0, carry the 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 plus 4 is 9. And 9 plus 9 is 18. And remember again that our decimal point drops right down from where it is. And we can see that when we sum up these numbers, they do add up to 180 degrees, which tells us that the answer that we got for our angle B is correct. Okay, so there you have it. We just calculated the measure of our unknown angle when we're working with decimal numbers. And you can see that the steps are pretty much the same as when we're working with whole numbers, but the only difference is we're lining up decimal points and not lining up numbers. So remember to get some additional practice in and make sure that you continue to develop your skills by practicing. And until next time, this is Jules Math Tools, where math is made easy.